Hello, my name is Andy Santana. I'm going to be talking about developing processes for mobile device forensics. So when it comes to mobile device evidence extraction, there really is 9 phases. The first phase is called intake. The second is identification. The third is preparation. The fourth is isolation. Then there's processing, verification, documentation and reporting, presentation, and then archiving. I'm going to go a little bit in depth with each one to let you know what happens in all these phases, and this is how now common digital forensics is done today. This is used almost globally. So we're going to start off talking about the intake phase. So here in this phase, what the forensics examiner does is try to collect forms and paperwork to be able to get the rights to the information and have the authority to see the information. Here, it really helps the examiner kind of set his goals and be able to say, hey, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it, and prep for the actual observation and collection of data. This is an integral step because without it, you can get into legal trouble in trying to extract this data. So what this does is that it gets rid of the legalization part, not necessarily get rid of it, but it goes through that process and allows them to be able to move forward when it comes to trying to have a device that they're trying to perform forensics on. The next phase is called the identification phase. Now here is usually where the examiner really defines everything, where it comes to the goals, when it comes to identifying information of the device itself, or even when it comes to identifying whether the device is an external device, removable device, what type of data device we're looking at, is it traditional, non-traditional, also what other sources of evidence could there be, is there fingerprints, is there anything that can allude to finding out or getting information that might help solve either the criminal case or the civil case. Here is where the examiner himself is trying to officially identify ways of finding out the answer or figuring out what's going on without necessarily going into the device just yet. And if that's the case, they have to go into the device, then they'll go into that device by setting those goals and being able to move forward with them. Now the preparation stage. Here's where the actual examiner prepares to be able to find out if they can do the extraction or how they would go about the extraction itself. There are many tools out there that exist for mobile extraction, and a lot of them depend on the type of cellular device you have, either if it's a CDMA, GSM phone, does it have a SIM card, things of that nature. One of the most common ones that I'm familiar with is called Cellebrite, which is usually compatible with every setup that you could get. And then you also have exactly how your extraction is going to go. There's the micro read, chip off, hex dump, logical analysis, and then the manual extraction. This is all a process in preparing for the extraction and just finding out what tools and equipment you're going to need in order to perform this extraction. The isolation. Now, this is important because if you don't do this step, you expose the data in a way that could be harmful to your investigation. The isolation phase is basically getting all the information that you've extracted, all this information this information you're about to extract, and making sure that it's in an isolated environment and somewhere where it cannot be altered, or there could be a kill switch on there, or a way that you can accidentally overwrite the data. This is where another way of going about it is having redundancy as well, having a copy of the data, and not necessarily working with it directly, but rather working with the copy in order for forensics. You basically want to make sure that nothing is happening to the data, that it's being examined and what you're looking at is authentic, it hasn't been altered, modified after you've started your process, and hasn't been damaged in any kind of way, shape, or form. The processing phase. Now, here is basically where you're processing the data. You're going through it. There might be some situations where you might lack the certain tools, or the device might be encrypted And if the device is encrypted, you run into a harder situation of trying to unlock that device and being able to get the data that you're looking for. In many situations, most phones nowadays come encrypted or either with a lock. So having efficient forensics tools is becoming more and more difficult, because nowadays devices now, if someone were to get a hold of that mobile device, it's almost impossible to bypass that lock and that encryption. It's meant to secure people's information so that if someone's phone ever got stolen or lost, they don't have to worry about their data being extracted. And that we live in an age where people heavily rely on their phones to be able to get what they need, or to be able to process things in their life, like their bank accounts or social security number, driver's license. All this stuff is becoming more and more available because of mobile devices, and most people are utilizing these mobile devices to accomplish their goals when registering and doing things of that nature. So because of the times changing, there is a possibility that an examiner might lack the tools to even perform an efficient and effective forensics analysis. So in this field, pretty much, we're just making sure we are separating the storage from the phone and examining it on its own and making sure that we can document as much as we can from this device. The verification stage. So here's where you really are analyzing the data. You're checking here to see if there's accuracy based on what you extracted, and compare it to its original data. What you extracted versus what the device shows. So if there's discrepancies, then you know there's been some alterations. Things have been changed or have gone wrong, or if you see errors where there shouldn't be errors, or there's flags where there shouldn't be flags, or even issues in the hex code itself. There might be errors where there's hidden messages, and you might have to examine the hex code to decode that data and ensure that the results are very consistent with what you're reporting. These are all things that are done in the verification stage, and mostly in this actual stage. Forensics analysis, an examiner will use multiple tools to make sure that there are no inconsistencies in his results, especially to make sure that, hey, if I see this on this device, am I going to see it on the other? Am I going to see it on the other? You want to make sure that they're consistent across the board, and that the issue is not the device you're using, but rather the device you are performing the verification on. You'll see forensics examiners use hash values to extract file systems of cellular devices that have hash values. That can also be tricky, especially if in those hash values salt is being used. It makes it extremely difficult to be able to extract that information and be able to get that info that you're looking for. Now we come to documentation and reporting. Now here is exactly where the analysis gets less physical and more in a sense of starting to write down and document and store data. So in this stage is where the examiner starts to take notes, document certain things like date and time, when the examination started, the physical condition of the device, what was found on the phone, what was found on the SIM card, what was found in memory expansion, just all identifications and information found on the mobile device, and even the status of the device, as well as the condition, make, model, what tools were used, what data was documented. Just pretty much writing down everything that was done throughout the entire investigation process. Now, the presentation phase sometimes is overlooked by examiners, but it's also very crucial, because how you present this data and how you present these results is crucial in proving your point, especially in court. This is something that's very, very heavily considered in court, especially if you're using pictures, you're using live data. You want to make sure that people understand what they're looking at, and that what you're saying is true and is understandable and can be translated to layman terms, per se, so that people can understand what you're saying and are not caught in the loop of technical jargon, per se. Also, you want to make sure you're providing references, you're giving information, telling people how they can find this information so that they can get a better understanding overall. The archiving phase. So here's where we're going to be saving information that's been extracted and documenting all that information somewhere where it can be stored and retained. in a usable format. So that's an important thing. You want to make sure that you have that data there for when there's court proceedings, or if you need to reference it again, or even for record keeping. It's very important to have that, especially due to proprietary nature of various tools on the market. Extraction data can, sometimes have the ability to save data at a later date, and some don't allow you to do that at all. It's really tricky, but overall, most of the time, it's a very, very good practice to start archiving data when you're looking at it, and after you've already gone through the whole process of your presentation in court, saving that data, making sure it's archived. And also make sure you always keep a copy of the tool itself to facilitate the viewing of data later. You don't want to have the data available and then you no longer have the tools available to see it. That can be a very messy situation. So in conclusion, we went over the 9 phases of the mobile evidence extraction, which covers everything on how to extract cellular data from a phone. Like I said earlier, it's something that has been developed, and it's in the development process as well. It's getting harder and harder to identify these devices. Analyze these devices because of the complexity of encryption and passcodes that are being created nowadays. So nowadays, if you want to analyze a device, you might have to get permission directly from the owner to be able to analyze those devices to see if anything has been altered. But that's even hard itself because in most cases you're working with a device in which you have to get legal permission, and the person's not going to voluntarily give you the password or tell you the cache key to unencrypt the data. So it's becoming harder and harder to use these forensic tools to be able to identify certain things. At least we were able to look at some of the things like the hex code and things of that nature, but the information is very, very limited. Again, when I spoke earlier about phone view, you can also use that, which is a really cool application. So thank you.